Welcome to Boswell Book Company's virtual event series. This is a special virtual public school event. We are so honored to be welcoming Lisa McMann back for I don't know how many times, but especially if I include every school visit as a different visit. She is gunning to be our world champion author, and I bet we have a lot of competition for schools in Phoenix, but we're trying anyway, because one of the rules of life is just because you can't win doesn't mean you shouldn't try hard. Lisa McMann is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of dozens of books like The Unwanteds and the Unwanteds series and the Wake trilogy. She's married to fellow writer Matt McMann, who has books coming out too, which is very exciting. And they have 2 adult kids. And all those books are really great, but right now we are completely in love with Clarice the Brave, and we love it so much we wanted to start you with a trailer for the book. So welcome Lisa McMann virtually to Milwaukee and Milwaukee suburbs and possibly Michigan too. We've heard there's people from all over, so welcome.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to hit the book trailer right now. So here it goes. It's really short.
Clarice has always stayed hidden to stay alive. But on a lifeboat, in the middle of the ocean, with a cat, Clarice has nowhere left to hide.
All right, so there it is. And here we are.
So let's start with just a few words about the book. You know, we call it your elevator pitch, but you're not in any elevator. So maybe you go on a boat and you leave the boat right away because you're like, this is too scary.
So Clarice the Brave, it's about 2 mice, a brother and sister, Clarice and Charles Sebastian, and they live on a ship. But something's happening on the ship with the sailors. They're not quite sure what's going on, but it sounds pretty intense. And then they hear the word mutiny, and mutiny means it's when the sailors rebel against the captain because maybe he's really mean to them or he's not a good captain, and they want to take over the ship. And so to do that, they either imprison him or they set him adrift in a lifeboat. And that's what these sailors choose to do. They decide they're going to take over the ship and throw the captain into a lifeboat. And then they have to give him some supplies and stuff like that too. So one of the crates that they throw into the lifeboat with the captain has Clarice inside. And Charles Sebastian, who's just been chased by one of the ship cats, has taken off. And so he's stuck on the ship. And that's how the 2 get separated. So as the lifeboat begins to drift away from the ship, Clarice is shouting across the waves to her brother saying, I'm going to find you again. And that's how the book begins.
Wow, what a wonderful story. I just really love this book, as did Tim. I might quote him later because he's more eloquent than I am. But what were some of, so this is such an old-fashioned adventure story with modern twists, of course, because it was written today or within the last couple of years. Did you have any inspiration? I'd love to hear what brought you to write this book, which is different from some of your other books.
Yes, it is very different from my other books, yet I just can't stay away from the adventure and the action. There's always something happening. There's always a lot of tension, which I love. And my Unwanteds fans already know that. There's a lot that goes on in those books. But in Clarice the Brave, I had this idea in mind for many years. I had so many books that I loved when I was younger, but also recently, that are animal journey stories. I loved Watership Down, which is about rabbits who have to travel to find a new warren. And The Incredible Journey, which is about two dogs and a cat whose family has moved away and they are trying to find them. And I love an animal journey story like Pax, which is fairly new. And I bet some of you have read Pax, and A Wolf Called Wander, which is another wonderful animal journey story that's more recent. So I love the animal journey story. I love the fact that animals have so many more obstacles to overcome than humans do a lot of the time. They not only have, other human enemies, they've got animal enemies, and they've got traps and things that they have to watch out for, like sailors' boots. They could get stepped on, a little mouse like that. And then, of course, the mouse and the cat situation, which happens in Clarice the Brave. Now, I also loved ship stories like Mutiny on the Bounty. I remember being a teenager and reading the whole trilogy of Mutiny on the Bounty, which is a fictional story of a mutiny, like I mentioned before, where the sailors rebel against the captain. But I always thought, what if there was a mutiny and mice got caught up in the fray and they got separated? The humans sometimes figure out a way to get back together, but how would mice ever do it? And I wasn't even sure I'd be able to pull it off. But so I combined my love of the animal journey story with my love of the shipboard story. True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle is another book that comes to mind. That is a ship story that I loved. So that's I guess some of the inspiration that led me to write this story.
And you can't forget about Treasure Island too. So
right, yes,
which is often adapted for, it's a book that older kids can read, and it's so popular that it's often adapted for younger kids. And there is treasure. I'm just saying. Oh my gosh, you've given me enough. That introduction gave me enough that I'm like, all right, I don't know where to even go from this point, but I enjoyed the old-fashioned journey, but I also like that you particularly chose a mouse. And I was thinking about mice in picture books, and what is it about mice heroines that just have it all over so many other species, from Stuart Little to Tale of Despereaux to Mouse and the Motorcycle to Redwall to all of Kevin Henke's books. What do you think? Do you know any mice? First of all,
not personally.
Yeah. Because
But
you realize now, after reading the book, that I'm thinking, I could probably befriend a mouse because I might not understand them, but they'll understand me.
right,
So
right.
what made you choose a mouse, and why do you think mice make such great heroes and heroines?
I actually first thought about making them rats because of the fact that there's so many mice main characters. Ralph S. Mouse, and there's just so many, and there's not very many rats that are main characters. But I just kept going back to the mouse thing because, first of all, they're so cute. I mean, they're adorable. Secondly, they are so little, they can fit into tiny spaces. And I loved the idea. I love tiny things, and I love, thinking of ways to utilize that in the story, of them being able to just narrowly escape something because they can fit into a tiny space that a cat's paw can't even really get into. Yeah, they're so small and vulnerable.
Yeah.
They just seem like everything's against them.
Yeah, I mean, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, there are a few, but I will say, having come across mice, and even though they may be a pest in your home, you're like, they're so cute, I don't know what to do. Whereas we once had when I was growing up, we once had a rat on our back porch, and let me just say, the cats were all afraid of the rat. So that wasn't going to work out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you really want your main character to be vulnerable, to be, have everything against them. So for you young writers out there, that's an important thing. You don't want your character to be completely super strong in every way. You want to have some setbacks. Now, mice aren't completely vulnerable and also slow and not very smart. My mice are really smart for mice. Well, even for humans, I think. And I did that on purpose as well, because I didn't want to write a book about like the mouse who didn't really understand anything that's going on, because I just felt like mice are always observing things. They are so quick to run when there's danger. They know things. So I wanted my mice to be somewhat intelligent.
You know, communication, it's funny that you should talk about that, because I thought a lot about communication in the story, and both the people who withhold things from other people in the book, but also the communication between species, and especially the special friendships that develop that are so different from each other. So you have one mouse who befriends a human and one mouse who befriends a cat, but they're such different stories. I love the idea of us being actually able to understand animals better. We just don't bother. So would you like to talk about that and how different, like what you were thinking about how a cat and a mouse could possibly, despite them being enemies in ways, what this, on the adult side, what this says about society? Go ahead.
You know, I really put some thought into that. I wondered, could I stretch it so far that the human would actually be able to understand what Charles Sebastian is saying, the human on board the ship? And I didn't think so. And I think I kind of had this theory that partly the reason and we don't understand what animals are saying is because we're not paying enough attention and we're not listening closely enough. Whereas the animals, sometimes they need each other in order to survive against humans. And so I just wanted them to be able to communicate. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the basis for me deciding, would Benjaloon in the prison on board the ship understand what Charles Sebastian, the mouse, is saying to her? Probably not. I felt like that would be a little too hard to believe, even though it's obviously, you know, some fantasy in this story. But would Special Lady, the captain's cat, be able to understand Clarice in the lifeboat? Maybe.
We don't know. That's the thing. So what I love is, like, it's fantasy, but it really tries to ride kind of that border between fantasy and reality. Like, it's not a cartoon. Like, you think the cat doesn't bake a pie, you know, the mouse doesn't build a castle, you know, they're doing things that mice and cats do. So much of this story, there's so many exciting things in the story, but one of the things that's so poignant is the way that friendship that's built between the cat and the mouse. And I think you're so honest about the fact that there's, you know, that cat's done some awful things.
Yes.
Did you, you know, like, was that, you know, you specifically didn't make that cat. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of cat fans in the audience, and there are some wonderful cats. I just love, you know, at one point in my family, include my sisters, had about 7 cats between them. So, I mean, like, we're cat people. Mm-hmm. But if you let your cat outside, they are going to bring back something eventually. And I think you see that in Special Lady. It's just the way she is. So how did you, but you didn't have to do it. There's plenty of cats. They're like, I'm an honorable cat. I don't eat anything but grass or something. You know, like, give me some bird seed, because you know, bird seed or a carrot. But you had to make that decision. But it makes it a more, you know, this is a book for kids, but there's some complicated philosophy in here. You know, we'll be studying this in graduate school one day.
Well, you know, I love writing a character who is one of my favorite characters, and I have one in every book, I think, just about, a character who's doesn't have the greatest morals. And I think that's really good for a classroom, for a family, to be able to talk about that character and point to that character. In the early pages of Clarice the Brave, you find out that special lady, the captain's cat, ate one of Clarice and Charles Sebastian's sisters, Olivia. And it's just thrown out there. It's just a really blunt statement. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to ground this in reality. This is a cat who lives aboard a ship, and they're going to eat their mousers. That's what their job is. It's to catch the mice and get rid of them. So, you know, that's sort of a morally gray character. And in my Unwanted series, we have Mr. Today, who's actually kind of a more morally gray character. He's done some terrible things in his past, but he's reformed and changed. You know, and in my future series, which is called The Forgotten Five, that comes out starting in February, one of the 5 kids is sort of that morally gray character as well. And I just love writing those characters because you can really get some depth there. And it's just so enjoyable for me.
I also feel like it's important to know that we all can do better and we can all redeem ourselves, because we've all done something bad, you know. Some people have done worse things than others. But you know, everybody's done something, you know, and the idea of thinking if you're not perfect, you can't be a hero in a kid's book. It's the same thing. So, so it's nice to know that we can. You know, her the relationship between Clarice and Charles Sebastian is mirrored in a way by the human siblings who are also separated. It's not as happy a story, but you know, there is, you know, I guess I'm not going to give anything away. And Benjaloon and Hey You, Heyu for anyone's asking. You had, once again, the decision to not make this a fantasy and make it, you know, grounded in reality. And I think they're half siblings actually, right? Yeah. So, what were you thinking about, you know, those characters who really are not the main characters in the book? They're, you know, the humans have to take a backseat in the story. What were you thinking when you were developing them, though? You probably had to build a lot of, even though they don't get too much, you probably had to build a lot of backstory, which is when an author like writes somebody's life almost, even though it's not all going to be in the book, but it really it makes it easier to kind of write about that person or animal, cat or mouse.
Yes. So Benjaloon and Heyu are half siblings. They basically, Benjaloon is around 12 or so, and Heyu's a bit older. He's in his teens, and he's an apprentice to the cook. He's learning how to work aboard a ship, and he does a lot of the grunt work, and the mice can't stand him, and the cats don't really love him either. But he had to take his younger sister on board this ship at the last moment because both of their parents are also sailors, and they were both out on different ships, and one of their parents' ships is lost at sea, and the other one was due back right before Heyu was about to go aboard the ship, and they didn't show up. So they don't know really what's going on with their parents during all this time. And we only see a little bit of that worry that they have because they're not the main characters. But that is in the background. And now they're separated as well. So it's quite traumatic, especially for Benjaloon, who's on board this ship with all the mutineers who've imprisoned her because she knows a little bit too much about the secrets that those sailors have. So she's imprisoned. Her brother, she believes, is not going to make it because they're on this lifeboat in the middle of the ocean and there's no way they'll ever make it to land. So she's got a lot of worries, and I think that lended itself to her expressing some of her worries out loud as she's lonely and bored to death and stuck in this jail.
You really give a feeling for what it was like to be on these ships at the time. I mean, it is not fun. It is not glamour. It is not fun and games. This was a tough, people got joy in it in their own way, but unless you were the captain, there's no reason to glamorize it.
Exactly. And I think one of the other fun things that I love to share with students is that there are chickens on board as well. And that just provides, this is a tough story in some ways, but it's also a story filled with hope. And also there's some funny parts. And the chickens provide a little bit of that humor.
What is it about chickens that are so funny? There's a series I really love called Skunk and Badger by Amy Timberlake and her new book, Egg Marks the Spot. And especially in Skunk and Badger, the chickens are they're hilarious. And they're, what is it? Do you know?
I don't know. And I think about this sometimes. What makes certain animals funny and other animals are like an owl is so smart or serious?
Dodgy, yeah.
And it's just so interesting. Dogs are often portrayed as sort of a happy-go-lucky, goofy kind of dog, like in Up, the Disney movie. And just, it's funny. Like, how did that happen? How did their personalities in general shape the way we write them in children's stories today? Very interesting.
Yeah, and even adult stories. We have a book coming up next year that we're very excited about. It's definitely for adults and maybe teenagers, but it looks like a kid's book, so people called Shady Hollow, and it's a series of mysteries in a world with animals. And it's true, like I was thinking about that as like what the animals do take on some things contrary to your expectations, but some things like you just have to make the owl kind of wise, but maybe not as wise as that owl thinks they are.
Yeah.
That's possibly from Winnie the Pooh. So I do think that, like that we do take some of the classic stories and they create some of the tropes that get passed down. Or by tropes, I mean, that was author speak. They take, like the maybe A. Milne says, something, a donkey's sort of like this. And so when you're writing a book, you wind up you have to decide, is my donkey going to be like Eeyore, or is it going to be different from Eeyore? Something that every writer has to think about. So sometimes you probably make it a challenge and say, I'm going to make my animal a little different from what everybody thinks that animal is going to be. So
absolutely. And I think writers face that question all the time. When I talked about Mutiny on the Bounty earlier, that is based on a true story of Captain Bligh. And in that story, that true story, it happened in the 1790s, I think. He was sent off on a lifeboat, and you can look it up on the internet and or at the library and read about Captain Bligh and how he got sent off onto a launch boat. But in that story, which was written a long time ago, I don't even know when, I don't want to even say, I'm thinking maybe in the late 1800s, but maybe more recent than that. But when that story was written, all of the characters are white people from England. And I decided that that's not what my ship would be. It would be quite different. There are sailors from all over the world. And That was also something that I wanted to change and be different, even though my story was kind of based on that Captain Bligh story. That doesn't mean I have to imitate absolutely everything about the story. And I have a lot of women sailors on board the ship, which Mutiny on the Bounty and the Captain Bligh story didn't depict any women on board, and girls. So that was something that I specifically had to think about and wanting to change from the original ideas.
And contemporary, and that's always, and if some people say, well, you're writing the present into the past. The truth is, everybody writes the present into the past. Whenever something's written, they're always thinking about, they're always sucked into or fused by or influenced by what's happening now. So every historical story has that. So that's very exciting that you did it too. I just put a link to the Wikipedia entry for the real Mutiny on the Bounty. So we'll see. You can open that up for later. We do have a couple of questions. I did want one more question. I might have later. But one of the things I had wanted to ask you was, I know with the Unwanted series that your kids had some influence on that story and how it was told and the setup and things. I wanted to know, they're now adults, they're amazingly wonderful, successful people, but other people besides your kids too. So I was wondering, did they or somebody else have some influence on this book?
So this is kind of funny. I sent an early copy of Clarice the Brave to my daughter to read, and she's an actor. She's working in Vancouver, and she hardly has any time to read. So I was really surprised one day when she called me up on FaceTime, and she was bawling her eyes out. She was so upset, and I'm like, what happened? I thought something terrible had to have happened. And she said, I just finished reading Clarice the Brave. And, she's an actor, so she's a little dramatic. But then she said, did you design Charles Sebastian after me? Which I'd never really thought about that before, but I think I do it unintentionally. Like I'll take a trait from one of my kids or from myself and put it into a character. And then that reminds me of Forgotten Five again. I was thinking about this kind of question for that series, like who inspired those characters? And I really think this is the first time in the Forgotten Five. Here, I even have, look, I have a poster. It's hard to see, but there they are.
Ooh.
Fun. Cool. But anyway, I just got it yesterday in the mail, so I'm so excited about it. But in that series, each of those 5 kids has a little bit of me in them. And so that was kind of neat. A lot of times I don't do that consciously.
Well, it's so early that I linked to the Forgotten Five, which is in our chat, and I realized, and the cover isn't there yet. So we saw a truly exciting debut. So very exciting there. And a lot of authors say that they're in all, like people say, this happens, I think, more with adult titles, where people say, are you the person in the book? And people say, everybody has to say no, unless it's a memoir. But an honest person says, I'm everybody in the book and I'm nobody in the book. So, and sometimes people are a little closer. And that's true about the people around us. So nobody wants to say, Special Lady is based on an ant that I really hate. But the truth is, maybe there's something about Special Lady that is based on that ant, not your ant.
No.
A question from Erin Armstrong, who wants to know, why did you use a mouse as a main character? Well, I think we talked a little about that. If you came in late, they're very small, they're very fast, and they seem smart. So
Yeah.
smarter
And they
than you
can get
think.
into little tiny places.
Tiny places, like, and then this is a wonderful question from Erin. Did you have any inspiration for the names in your story? I would love to hear that question too, the answer.
You know, this is a hard question for me. I think a lot of people, a lot of authors can easily answer, where did this name come from? And sometimes I can, for certain characters. I might have named them for someone, like in the Unwanteds, Marcus today is named after my daughter's drama teacher here in the Phoenix area where I live. And so I named him Marcus. But for Clarice and Charles Sebastian, I do remember that Charles Sebastian came to me first, but it's because I really thought he is the more timid and the smaller mouse of the two. He's the runt of the litter. And so he should have a really long name to kind of make up for it. And so that just, I don't know where that came out of nowhere, but I had his name first. And then I debated about Clarice. That's kind of came out. It sounded really good with Clarice and Charles Sebastian. So, but I know that name is used several times in some other picture books and things like that. So I wanted to be careful, but I couldn't change it after I started writing it. That's who she seemed to be to me. So I kept it, and I love that name for her. It's perfect. Benjaloon, I chose the backstory that you don't really see from Benjaloon is that she is Moroccan. And so that is a name that I pulled from just doing some Google searches for popular names in Morocco, and maybe names that were more popular a couple hundred years ago. And I pulled that one for that reason. Hey You is a fun name because that's not his real name, but I'm not going to tell you.
No, keep it a secret.
Okay, you'll have to read the book to find out what that's all about.
We have a question from Jimmy who wants to know, oh, thanks, Jimmy. Are you done with the Unwanteds?
Yes, I'm all done. I don't think there will be any more ever. There are 7 books in the first series. There are 7 books in the second series, and I think it's done.
Yeah, that's a lot of books, Jimmy. You'll probably. I don't know if you've read all 14, but if you haven't read all 14, by the time you get to the 14th book, you'll say, I think I want to read a different book now. So maybe not. And maybe there'll be, some other creator, maybe your daughter, when she's super successful, will say, something, I think I just want to play it. I want to create the Unwanteds television series or streaming series, or I mean, she certainly wants to play a character in the animated version of Clarice the Brave. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
She said if that ever happened, that she would want to voice Special Lady.
Of course, that is definitely the meatiest role. I agree.
Yes, and for those who are sad that the Unwanteds is over, I think you are going to love the Forgotten Five, as well as Clarice the Brave. There's so much action and adventure.
Right.
The Forgotten Five is about 5 supernatural kids who were born and raised on a deserted island. And they decide to enter society for the first time in order to search for their missing criminal parents. So it's the beginning of a series. The first book comes out 2/22/22. Best
Oh,
date.
what a date. What a date. I hope you got to pick it. You did. No. Yes, I can't imagine somebody who didn't love the Unwanted wouldn't love this new series. It sounds really great. I have a couple more questions. Oh, Suzette has a couple questions from Donja Space School. Oh, and I actually want to know this too. How do you organize your plot ideas when you're writing your books? And she did say, I want to add one thing to that. It's like, do you know what's going to happen? Do things change? or how surprised are you by these stories? But we also want to know how you organize, because I've seen some really great there's computer programs, there's post-it notes, there's everything. So tell us everything. Tell us all your secrets that we'll steal to write our own books that are not your books.
Well, for those of you who are very organized people, hold on to your chairs or grab, find a fainting couch, because I have no organization whatsoever. It's all in my head. And I do write maybe a paragraph or two about what each book in a series is going to contain, which is completely subject to change. Because when I'm writing a story, I always know what the ending is going to be of a series. I know how it's going to end. I know what the last scene is like. In fact, for the Unwanteds series, I knew what was going to be at the end of the last book in the second series for years and years and years. And when I finally got to that book, when I started writing it, I wrote the last chapter first, because I was so anxious to write it. I've had it in my head all this time. But I don't use Post-it notes. I don't use Scrivener, which is a wonderful program that my husband uses and finds to be just awesome. I just have I have a few notes on my phone, and half the time I can't find them, but everything important sticks with me. And I always know, I just get like a little tingle or something when I know I've got the right idea, and it doesn't go away. It's always there. Like I know what happens next here.
I think, I guess I'd call you a pantser with caveats. We have the planner pantser thing, because you do know the end. I'm so surprised, and I think everyone in the audience will be surprised to know this too. How many mystery writers don't know who did it, like until it happens? Like some people do. Some people plan everything. If you ever want to watch Amor Towles, who has these, he might write a kid's book one day, but right now he's been writing adult books, The Lincoln Highway, which is actually about teenagers, but still, he has everything plotted out. He's so organized. And then other people kind of know the end like you, but there really are people who just like, I have no idea.
I don't think I could do it having no idea. But there were certain things at the end of Clarice the Brave that I wasn't sure which way it was going to go at the very end, until I got there. And then I make the decision. But I usually have two options. I'm like, okay, either they live or they die. And I'm not sure. And that happened in the Unwanteds a lot, but I always put a lot of thought into it.
Suzette has another question, or Don Giuseppe has another question about a possible movie series or some sort of streaming series for the Unwanteds. And like I said, when Kennedy gets her Oscar and can call the shots, then we can do it. But until then, it doesn't sound like there's something in the works, right?
Not at this time. I've talked to many different Hollywood producers, and this is a great question because I have a lot of kids who ask me, why don't you just make a movie out of it? And it's because I don't know how. I don't know how to make a movie. That's not what I've had any training for. And I like to write the books. But I would love to see my books turned into movies, but that's a different job. So people who have that job need to figure out what books would make a good movie. And they're always reading books. The people in Hollywood who work on films for children, they're always looking to see what the next thing could be that would be something wonderful for the screen. And I've had some people talk to me about it, and I even had an offer once, and it just didn't work out for various reasons. So sometimes the person who's excited about making it leaves the company and goes somewhere else, or maybe the people who want to make the show or movie have an idea that I don't like. And then I say no, because I do want it to be hopefully something very similar to what I've written. But there's no promises either. I mean, we've seen that happen a lot of times.
Oh, I've seen things take 10, 20 years. I'm so sorry that you heard a little mumbling. I forgot to mute myself. Somebody asked, they came in a little late and they missed the trailer for Clarice the Brave. And so I found it on YouTube. And so I'm going to send it now. And If you're in a classroom, you can share it. Or if you're an individual, post it anywhere. We'd love for everybody to know how wonderful this book is. And somebody said, is there going to be a Forgotten Five trailer? Sounds like you're pretty good at trailers, but I don't know. So is there?
Yes, there will be a lot of exciting things for the Forgotten Five. It probably won't come out until right around the release day, February 22. But I'll post it on my Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. Those are the places you can find me or your parents. And if you actually, kids, if you have accounts on social media, please ask your parents first before you follow me and make sure it's okay.
Yeah.
But all of my accounts are family friendly. So I talk about my books a lot and I talk about my family. So that's about it.
All very positive. Let's see if this is really almost time for our last question. So this is your chance. I think we've hit everyone who asked questions, but you can send it in chat or Q&A. And we'll ask one last question. What's the question that I forgot to ask you? That's my last question. Do you get asked a particular question besides how old you are and how much money you make, which is the ones we get in schools?
I do get those questions a lot.
I don't want to ask those. So, but is there another one?
Let's see. I'm left-handed. That's a fun question. So like, I'm left-handed and I really like avocados. And what else?
Oh, I know. I've got one for you.
What?
Advice to a kid who wants to write.
Awesome. All right. Here's what you do, kids. I know there's a book out there that you love to read over and over again. And you've read it so many times, you know it by heart pretty much, but you just keep reading it because it makes you feel good and you enjoy it. So I want you to read that book again. And this time read it like a writer. And I want you to think about what about this book makes me want to keep reading it, even though I know exactly what's going to happen next. And find those passages that you can't wait to get to. And then narrow that passage down into just a couple of pages. And then I want you to try and write something similar. So maybe there's a passage where there's a lot of action and adventure. Somebody's hanging off a cliff and they're going to fall and then something happens. I want you to take your own ideas, your own story, put your character in a similar situation, and just practice writing that kind of a scene, the same kind of scene that makes you excited about reading that book. So that's my advice for writers. That's a good way to practice action and adventure, or maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's a parent and a child. One thing I love to write are like a grandfather, grandmother figure with a child. I love that generational difference. And I think that's so fun to write. Maybe you do too. Maybe write a scene like that. But
what I also love about it is like, you don't have to start out saying, I'm going to write the next Harry Potter. Like, focus yourself down to something you can do and that you can actually accomplish and be happy about and share with folks. And if you write about that grandparent and it's a good one, share it with your grandparents.
yes.
They'll start crying. They'll start crying.
Yeah.
Just like Kennedy.
You can give it for a holiday, you know, or their birthday.
Well, thank you so much. Clarice the Brave is available at all your favorite independent bookstores, wherever you're from. You can buy it from us too. Thank you. Congratulations. And we're looking forward. Some of us are looking forward to book 15 of the Unwanteds. But for the rest of us, we've got more wonderful books to come.
Thank you so much. It was such a delight to be with everybody today. Thanks for showing up. And I hope you enjoy the book.
Thank you. We did, and you will.